Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this briefing session. This afternoon, we have Secretary East with us, and JS ASEAN and Ambassador to ASEAN, Mr. Suresh Reddy, Ambassador Suresh Reddy. Secretary will take time to brief you on the Delhi Dialogue-VII, and after which we'll open the floor for question and answers. So without much ado, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. For all of you who follow India's Act East policy and ASEAN-India relationship, Delhi Dialogue is not a new phrase, not a new coinage. As you know, it's the premier annual Track 1.5 forum for discussing the three pillars of political security, economic and socio-cultural issues between ASEAN and India. And the first edition of this dialogue was in 2009. It's now evolved into a useful forum for brainstorming on all aspects of ASEAN-India relationship, and it's also contributed immensely towards strengthening of our strategic partnership with ASEAN. So this year's Delhi Dialogue assumes more salience on two accounts. One, it comes in a year when it is, which is a milestone in the history of ASEAN, because it moves towards the ASEAN Economic Community, which is the culmination of decades-old economic integration efforts to create a free market of goods, services, investment, capital, and also skilled labor. And secondly, it comes at a time when our own foreign policy has entered an era of new vigor and dynamism as our erstwhile Look East policy transformed into Act East policy. So against this background, we are hosting the 7th edition of the Delhi Dialogue from tomorrow. And the overall theme this time is ASEAN-India shaping the post-2015 agenda. As in previous years, we have invited foreign ministers of ASEAN countries for the inaugural session of the event, which is on 11th March 2015. The Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Thailand, the Minister of Education from Cambodia, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs from Indonesia, who was also a special envoy of President Jokowi this time, carrying invitation for the Bandung conference. Deputy Foreign Minister of Myanmar and Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN Secretariat will be attending, amongst others. Rest of the countries will be represented by senior officials, vice ministers or senior officials in the foreign ministries, and a couple of them by the resident ambassadors. The Northeast region is a land bridge to Southeast Asia, as you know. As in the previous years, ways of integrating Northeast India with the ASEAN region, as we envision in the India's Look East or Act East policy, will be discussed. And the chief ministers of northeastern states have been invited also to be part of the inaugural session to share their vision of participating in the ASEAN-India strategic partnership. So far, we have received confirmations from chief ministers of Nagaland, Meghalaya, and Manipur, and a minister from Assam also for the event. And other state governments will send senior representatives. Our Minister for External Affairs would be delivering the keynote address at the inaugural session. And after the External Affairs Minister and the ASEAN Cabinet Ministers have delivered their addresses, there will be panel discussions by ASEAN heads of delegations and Northeast chief ministers on two themes mainly. One is building connectivity between India and ASEAN, and second on the future direction on India-ASEAN strategic partnership. This will be followed by a short half-an-hour cultural program by Indian Council for Cultural Relations, and then a dinner hosted by our Minister for External Affairs for the delegates. We also have a business session in this year's edition. This is an additional. And this dedicated business session will have panel discussions on two themes. One is ASEAN Economic Community, benefits for the ASEAN and Indian industry, with focus on Make in India campaign of the Government of India. and also the second one on trade in services as driver for future economic cooperation, views from India and ASEAN. There is an impressive lineup of participants in the business section, including business delegates from India and the ASEAN countries. Then we have the academic session on the 12th. The academic session will cover a wide range of discussions on subjects such as maritime security, on cyber security, skills development, building a knowledge society and economy, and cultural linkages, integration of regional production networks and value chains, infrastructure and energy, and the way forward, finally, for ASEAN-India relations. The focus of all these issues on strengthening the ASEAN-India strategic partnership in the long run is of course, predominant. And members of strategic community think tanks and opinion makers in the region will also talk about a range of issues across the region. As far as the Act East policy is concerned, as you know, since taking over by the new government in May last year, there is an increased focus on India's eastern neighborhood and beyond. And the government has moved with a sense of priority and some amount of speed to transform the Look East policy into an Act East policy. And ASEAN-India relationship, of course, is the foundation of India's Act East policy. Ever since India became a sectoral partner of ASEAN in 1992, the potential and scope of the ASEAN-India partnership has grown, commensurate with the increase in our collective capacities and also our growing economic integration. Also, the ASEAN-led East Asia Summit is an important pillar of our Act East policy. As far as the ASEAN-India strategic partnership is concerned, many of you know that we hosted the commemorative summit in New Delhi in December 2012 to mark 20 years of ASEAN-India relations, where we decided to elevate our relationship to a strategic partnership. Today there are 26 annual dialogue mechanisms with the ASEAN, including a summit and 7 ministerial level meetings in key sectors. Our ministers and officials meet regularly to expand our agenda, while our leaders meet every year to provide overall vision and guidance to the relationship. As far as connectivity is concerned, we see ASEAN as a bridge to the wider Asia-Pacific region. Enhancing connectivity in all dimensions, whether it's physical, institutional, and people-to-people with our Asian neighborhood, is one of our strategic priorities. This enhanced connectivity will undoubtedly bring a lot of benefits to all countries of the region. It holds, in particular, immense potential to bring about a significant positive development impact on our northeastern region. We have established annual institutional dialogue with ASEAN in the form of meetings with the ASEAN Connectivity Coordination Committee. It's called ACCC in short, which is the overall coordinating body for the implementation of the master plan on ASEAN connectivity. We have had 2 meetings between the ACCC and India so far, where we have been working to enhance our connectivity with the ASEAN in all 3 aspects, that's physical, institutional, and also people-to-people. We are implementing, as you know, the Trilateral Highway Project, which proposes to provide seamless connectivity from Moreh in Manipur to Mae Sot in Thailand via Myanmar. Work is also in progress on the Kaladan Multimodal Transport Project, which will provide a road and river link between Myanmar and Mizoram, and also connect Indian ports to Sitwe port in Myanmar. There are other connectivity projects such as the Reetidim Road, and we are also endeavoring to increase maritime and air connectivity between ASEAN and India so that we could change the corridors of connectivity into corridors of economic cooperation. So at this point, let me tell you briefly on the direct fortnightly freighter service also from Myanmar, which was started by the Shipping Corporation of India in October last year. It has proved to be a commercial success. The service was started from 3rd October 2014 from Chennai And the first shipment arrived at Yangon on 8th October 2014. We plan to commission a study soon to see if this experiment can be replicated both for cargo and passenger services with other Southeast Asian countries as well. Now, a little bit about the three funds and projects that we have with ASEAN. We have established, as most of you know, three funds to support collaborative activities with ASEAN: the ASEAN-India Cooperation Fund, the ASEAN-India Science and Technology Fund, and the ASEAN-India Green Fund, under which various projects are under implementation. One of the most important projects is ISRO's space project for establishment of tracking and data reception station and data processing facility at Ho Chi Minh City, and upgradation of tracking, telemetry, and command center at Biak in Indonesia. The project also looks at training of ASEAN personnel in space science and technology at the Center for Space Science and Technology Education in Asia and the Pacific. India is establishing centers for English language training, centers of excellence in software development, and conducting training courses in Cambodia, Laos, PDR, Myanmar, and Vietnam. That's the CLMV countries, under our initiative for ASEAN integration, narrowing the development goals. And that's also a catchword in the ASEAN. Quick impact projects, a little bit about them. We have announced commitment of $1 million every year for India CMLV quick impact projects to fund what we call short gestation period projects directly benefiting the local communities. A little bit about trade and investment. On the trade front, the India-ASEAN trade, as many of you know again, was about $75 billion in 2013-2014, registering a 22% increase per annum over the last 10 years. And the target as set by the leaders of India and ASEAN at the 10th summit in 2012 is $100 billion by 2015. Now, foreign direct investment equity inflows into India from ASEAN between April 2007 and March 2014 were about $25.4 billion US, and FDI outflows from India to ASEAN countries between April 2007 to March 2014 were about $31.2 billion US. At the second ASEAN-India summit in 2003, the leaders had signed the ASEAN-India Framework Agreement on Comprehensive Economic Cooperation, which laid a good basis for the establishment of an ASEAN-India Free Trade Area to include an FTA in goods, services, and investment. You all know that the ASEAN-India Trade in Goods Agreement was signed in 2009, creating one of the world's largest free trade areas, market of around 1.8 billion people, with a combined GDP of US dollars 3.8 trillion. And the agreement entered into force on 1 January 2010. There was a positive response from the business community, translating into a significant increase in bilateral trade, which rose from under US dollars 44 billion in 2009-2010 to about $75 billion that we have in 2013-2014. The agreements on trade in services and investments were signed last year and are likely to enter into force later this year and give a major boost to trade and investment. Brunei, Malaysia, and Singapore have already ratified the agreements, while the rest of the ASEAN members are expected to follow up. And with the signing of these agreements, the ASEAN-India FTA is now complete. We are also engaged with ASEAN countries and their other dialogue partners in negotiations to complete the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, RCEP as it's called. A little bit about the plan of action for 2016 to 2021 with the ASEAN, because our last plan of action is going to end soon. This year's edition of the Delhi Dialogue gives us a very good opportunity to get all the stakeholders in the ASEAN-India strategic partnership together and also to brainstorm on all aspects of the relationship. So within the next 2 days, we will see our business, government, and academia all come together under the umbrella of this Delhi Dialogue process. And I think this is a real strength and significance of this process. We are in the process of drafting our next plan of action for the period 2016 to 21 to implement the ASEAN-India partnership. And I'm sure that the deliberations in Delhi Dialogue-VII will help us explore newer ideas and better ways to enhance this cooperation. Now, a little bit about the partners and our associates for Delhi Dialogue-VII, which will also be in your press release. Delhi Dialogue-VII is being organized, of course, by the Ministry of External Affairs in partnership with the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FICCI, Indian Council of World Affairs, ICWA, Institute of South Asian Studies, Singapore, ISAS, the SAEA Group Research of Singapore, the Institute of Strategic and International Studies of Malaysia, ISIS, not to be confused with the other ISIS, ASEAN India Center in New Delhi, the Economic Research Institute of ASEAN and East Asia area in Jakarta, the Institute of Security and International Studies in Thailand, and supported by the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations, ICRIER, the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, ASOCHAM, All India Association of Industries in Mumbai, and the Indian Chamber of Commerce in Kolkata. The partners and the associates have put in a lot of effort and have organized events in the run-up to Delhi Dialogue-VII. The events pertaining to various aspects of ASEAN-India strategic partnership have been organized by the ASEAN-India Center, Indian Chamber of Commerce in Kolkata, All India Association of Industries in Mumbai, the ICWA, and ICRIER over the past few months. And the outcome documents of these events will be presented during the academic session of Delhi Dialogue-VII. So we hope that the participants of Delhi Dialogue-VII will help in contributing ideas to evolve a new vision or newer vision for the ASEAN-India relationship as we head towards our 25th anniversary, which will happen in 2017. So that's by way of background to Delhi Dialogue-VII. You will get a press release which has all the salient points in it, but this was some details. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll open the floor for question and answers. Please identify yourself and direct your questions to Secretary, or if any specific to Ambassador is here, Joint Secretary ASEAN Multilateral is there.
Can one attend in all the sessions, or are just limited to only inauguration or something?
It's like this, the business and the academic sessions are open to anyone who wants to come in, so you're most welcome. The evening event, which is the inaugural part, which is actually the ministerial, that one is by invitations, but we have no problems. In case you are interested, we can extend an invitation to you. Yes, I understand. Yeah, definitely. So you'd like to cover their. Yes, there is a desk outside, so all the papers at the event will be there. And we'll also have papers from the previous session. There'll be, in fact, a compilation of a book which will be released on Delhi Dialogue-VI, which will happen also at this session. It will be released by External Affairs Minister.
Are you also discussing the security, regional security issues with ASEAN countries in this particular Dialogue-VII?
Yes, we will be discussing regional security as well. Regional security architecture, South China Sea issues, maritime security, cyber security.
Ranjit Kumar from Bharat Times. And what is the new target date for completing this trilateral highway and Kaladan project? It has already been delayed so long.
Yeah, I think now, it's on track, back on track. There were two things which happened. One is the alignment was changed in between, and the other problem which happened was that there was no synchronization of the work which was going on Kaladan. But I think Kaladan is the one which will finish earlier than the trilateral, because the trilateral also requires, and I've been saying this in the past also, a lot of soft infrastructure to be put into place, which is commonality of working out commonalities in terms of licensing, driving, also customs procedures, software which will be applied at the borders, and also training of personnel. There are five major elements there. So India, Myanmar, and Thailand have set up a working group on that, and they're one by one trying to sort out the issues. Within India itself, the Ministry of External Affairs has taken steps last year itself to get an interministerial group which is working on identification of issues which will feed into this process of the trilateral software group. And also this year, we're going to have a ministerial meeting on the trilateral highway, which will be held in Thailand in the middle of this year. So I think both the projects are on track now. Kaladan will be completed earlier than the trilateral, but I would say we are looking at 2016. That is the target. Yeah, for both projects. Yes.
Sir, in the last few months, the Chinese have made artificial islands where they have put up airports. And this is something that even the Americans, when the Pacific commander was here a few days ago, he expressed concern about it publicly. Is this an issue that will come up during your discussions, the right of passage through the South China Sea? And what is India's view on this?
Well, when we discuss the security issues in South China Sea, maritime security, etc., obviously these issues will come up, and there would be participants who would be discussing these. As indeed they come up during the East Asia Summit and ARF meetings year after year. The idea is to evolve a security architecture, first of all, in the region, which is being currently discussed in workshops in the East Asia Summit and ARF context. And secondly, also the process of the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea, which is engaging China and the ASEAN countries at the moment. So definitely all these issues will come up.
Hi, this is Stacy from Hong Kong Phoenix TV. As you mentioned that this China's artificial islands will be one of the topics discussed in this dialogue, but we see that U.S. and ASEAN countries say this is a concern for them. So is this also a concern for India?
As I said, in response to the previous question, I said that any of these aspects could be discussed. I'm not saying that this particular aspects will be discussed. It's part of the overall security situation in the South China Sea. But as far as the countries of ASEAN are concerned, yes, it is a concern for them. They have expressed this in the past. As far as India is concerned, our main concern is freedom of navigation in the South China Sea, and also freedom of navigation in the rest of the part of the world, wherever our trade and our liners pass through. And that is something that we have always subscribed to.
Sir, one major handicap in the connectivity is that on the Indian side, the infrastructure is not ready. Like where China, it connects with Myanmar and all, they have all the infrastructure ready. So has India also started boosting its infrastructure on its side to ensure the seamless connectivity?
Yes, I think that's a very important question that you asked, because it's very important to develop infrastructure within the Northeast and to make sure that there is connectivity within the Northeast itself to ensure that the connectivity which we get from via Myanmar into Thailand is fully utilized. And for that purpose, the state governments and also the central government are working on improving connectivity through roads and also railways, including getting foreign investment and foreign partners to work on specific projects. So that process is on, and it will continue in the foreseeable future.
More questions, please? Yes, please.
They're quite keen that India take on a more robust role in the security architecture where China is concerned in the South China Sea. So has India thought about it? Is India going to involve itself in a more deeper way?
You know, you might be aware that India has put forward a paper on the security architecture in the region as part of the workshop process under the East Asia Summit and ARF. And we intend to participate regularly in the meetings and put our view across. We've always said that the footprint of the East Asia Summit is the ideal number of membership, as well as the geographical proximity of the countries who are participating, the geographical footprint, which is just right for this kind of a security architecture. And we've also laid down some principles for the security architecture. Now, of course, there are many views on this, and other countries have also put forward their views. I think what finally evolves would be a consensus of views, which will require some more deliberations in the future.
You recently had a security breakthrough in Thailand when you arrested Jagtar Singh. Do you think this sort of security cooperation will come up during the dialogue, especially in context of India-Myanmar relationship?
You know, these are bilateral issues and bilateral security issues which we have with various ASEAN countries. I think what we would be discussing here is the need to strengthen the bilateral security aspect, and that's why we're going to talk about cyber security. We're also going to talk about security in general and what ASEAN and India should be doing in the future to strengthen that. Part of this will feed into our vision document and what will be implemented in the coming years. I must say that our security cooperation with the ASEAN countries has been exemplary. It's been very good in many cases. The case that you cited is just one example. There are many others, and we need to keep on strengthening that cooperation. Of course, not just as far as India is concerned, but as far as ASEAN countries are concerned, within themselves and with India, both ways. So that is what we are aiming at in the future.
Yeah, this is Stacy again. Yeah. Because we see that U.S. Advanced surveillance plane just patrolled in South China Sea, which caused a huge concern in China. And now, as you mentioned that India is having the Act East policy, a lot of people are curious what kind of bigger role India will play in South China Sea. And beyond economy, will we see some kind of other level of participation in South China Sea, such as militarily? From India side. Thank you.
We have a cooperative approach to solving all security problems. That includes the South China Sea and any other security issues which come up with ASEAN. And our aim is to make sure that there is an approach which is based on conciliation and on a peaceful means of negotiations. So whatever means that we adopt in the future will be with that aim in mind. And that's all I have to say at this point.
Maritime connectivity between India and ASEAN, it's quite, I had attended one of your lectures earlier, where maritime connectivity still lags far behind. So, because India doesn't have the requisite ports and the containers and etc., etc. So, and that is through seas what majority of the trade moves. So, is something happening on that front? Is India doing something?
Yes, I think I forgot to mention that aspect, but last year we did start this process as well of strengthening our maritime connectivity with ASEAN. And one of the first steps in that direction was to get together all the stakeholders of the region, people who are working on this within India. It requires work on several fronts. It requires work on strengthening our ports, making sure that they are equipped to deal with increased exports, to bring down the time taken for our exports as well as imports, to make sure that we have enough feeder lines so that all our ports are utilized, especially on the eastern seaboard, making sure that the eastern seaboard is properly connected with ASEAN ports as much as possible, and also finally making sure that we have joint venture shipping lines between India and ASEAN in the future. The reason is quite simple, because if you are dependent on other lines, then you cannot actually develop your own lines, and that increases the costs of your exports and trade, and that also increases the charges for insurance, etc. So we have to bring in all the stakeholders. We started that process. We organized 2 brainstorming sessions on that. This year we plan to continue with the process, and that is happening in parallel with what we are doing by way of putting together the software for the connectivity projects, which physical connectivity projects between India and the ASEAN countries.
You talked about cybersecurity repeatedly, and I'm curious to know, because lots of reports coming from Southeast Asia of cyber crimes involving various South Asian countries, including Sri Lanka. There have been reports of some sort of Tamil extremists also who have been using cyber routes for in different kinds of financial and non-financial purposes. I want to know what sort of cooperation are you looking at cybersecurity front in that region?
We are looking at cyber security to ensure that our legitimate trade and economic interests, first of all, are not compromised. Secondly, the critical security installations are not compromised. And thirdly, that it does not cause a disruption in the lives of ordinary people. So in that respect, we need to involve both the governments as well as the industry. And that is what we did in the first organization of the first such conference, which is India and ASEAN. In 2015, we plan to carry forward this process. And the minutes that were signed at the end of the first conference have stated that this process will be taken forward between India and ASEAN in the future.
Before I take the last question, yeah, that's the last question. If Madam and Sir, any specific points that you want to add on? Then last question, please. Yes, please.
Would Nalanda University figure in the discussions, especially because a lot of ASEAN countries have promised funding for this university, and India has been signing MOUs with these countries?
Yes, I suppose if somebody has an interest in signing on to the MOU, they would make their intentions known.
Thank you, sir, for your time, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon.